This is Tom Fazio, martial arts instructor at Enso Temple Fashion and Fitness Lounge in Shanghai, China, and this is the art of the sash. After I had about 6 or 7 years of soft weapons training under my belt, I started to realize that the materials that were used, traditionally the chain, the 9 segment lash, the rope, in terms of the rope dart or the meteor hammer, were not very practical tools. And I believe that if you're going to learn a weapon, it needs to be something that is not simply academic or that belongs in a studio, that it needs to transition into the real world to a certain extent. And even though soft weapons are everywhere, you can always wear a necktie, you can always have a belt, I wanted a tool that was a little bit more specific, that could cover the full range of soft weapons training. And so I started to have my own custom made in Shanghai by tailors who would stitch these 2 and 4 meter long pieces of silk for me that contain a steel ball at the end. All of the wraps, shoots, and whipping techniques can be demonstrated at a range, and then once you remove the ball, you can use the sash to grapple with, to do close quarter fighting. And eventually, I don't cover this in the DVD, but there's a host of techniques with the steel ball itself, um, which is, to put it bluntly, it's a very dense, hard object that you can hit people with. So that's the essence of the soft weapons I put together, and I've gotten great feedback from them so far. A lot of people love the feel of the silk and love to train with them. And if you're interested, give them a try. So before we get into some of the technical elements of the training, let's cover first a few safety issues. First of all, this is dangerous stuff. If you train with these kinds of weapons, you're going to get hit. If the type of weapon you're training with is hard or sharp, you're going to get hurt. Start with a soft weapon. They're all considered soft weapons, but I mean start with something that has a soft and spongy type of weight. Odd enough, I think that gummy bears are excellent. They're actually quite dense and heavy, and at the same time, they're not going to hurt too bad when you get hit. I've also used sand, and occasionally fine or small ball bearings or lead beads. Um, the ones I have in the demonstration and my particular weapons are designed to hold a steel ball. I get inquiries all the time about where to get the steel ball, how to train with it. Don't use it, okay? Spend 5 years minimum with this weapon before you start adding a steel ball to it, because it will just destroy everything in its path. So that's the first one. Yeah, train with a soft weight, and do not use the steel balls that I demonstrate with. If you're practicing some of the locking and the throwing techniques, I cover some of the fundamentals of the technique without the sash. But if you want to learn these well, you have to at some point go back and study the techniques without a weapon, the empty hand techniques. You can find most of these techniques in Hapkido and Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu, and put a little bit of time in, find a competent instructor, and you'll at least learn the points of leverage and at least how to execute these on a live body. It's necessary to learn the techniques well. If you jump right in and you have no experience locking or throwing, and you put the sash on and you start wrenching somebody's arm, you're going to pop a shoulder out of socket, you're going to hyperextend an elbow. The techniques are very dangerous. Okay, so be careful in training, treat your partners with respect, and be safe. The last point is that some of the throws that I perform here and some of the locks, I'm using one of my students that I actually hired as an assistant and a training partner several months prior to the shooting with one specific purpose. I taught him to fall and how to receive all these techniques without getting hurt. That's all we focused on. If you don't have a training partner that can fall properly, and by fall properly, I mean to execute a break fall, then you can't train these at 100%. Okay, the reason a lot of times you see somebody do a high break fall or an aerial is not always because the force of the throw dictates that, but it's because the torque and tension in the joint or in the arm is sufficient enough that if they do not throw themselves into a break fall, they're going to lose the limb. Okay, the wrist is going to break, the elbow is going to break, the shoulder is going to dislocate. And so the reason for learning to fall this way is to spare your own limb if you're being thrown. And with the outer wrist lock movement, with the shoulder lock that I perform, I'm doing them a lot of times at full speed with my partner. Um, you need to execute caution with all of these techniques. They're very dangerous. In addition to having an awful lot of fun making the demonstration for this DVD tutorial, one of the main reasons I wanted to put a form together was to show all of the techniques in the context of the flow. This is not a traditional form. I put it together over about 3 months prior to the filming of the demonstration. And with the primary focus of covering all of the categories of soft weapons use. So in the first part of the demo, we look primarily at whipping and long-range shooting techniques, and in the second part, we cover primarily close-quarter sash fighting and grappling techniques, and a few pinning techniques as well. Okay, so let's go through this demonstration a bit, just to give you guys an introduction to the wide array of possible soft weapons techniques and categories. First part here. Enter Man of Mystery, removes jacket. Special thanks to Monica Figlovich for designing this great suit and adding a bit of style to the demonstration. Now the initial part there, when I remove the sash, I have these things custom made. I produced them in Shanghai. The one that I'm using in the video there is 4 meters long, which is quite long. It's a bit more than most people will need, but it was necessary for the length, at least for the demo, to wind up with the double sash techniques. And I house these steel meditation balls in the ends, at least for the demo. Okay, again, don't train with these. You'll poke your eye out, kid. Okay, moving on. Okay, so almost from the time that we start the demonstration here, I'm in constant movement. And again, the idea of this demonstration is to teach the flow of the techniques. It's what makes soft weapons training very unique, in that there's no beginning or an end to a technique, and to be good at this weapon, to master the weapon, you have to be constantly adapting to it. If there is a difference between what martial artists do with soft weapons training and what is now quite popular, fire spinning and poi, the difference is not so much in the techniques. Okay, poi doesn't require the same kind of power and range, but it also does not contain the footwork that makes these things a martial art. Okay, and a lot of times people won't look down and look at what your feet are doing, but the key to any of these techniques is not so much what you're doing with your hands, but how your body is counterbalancing the force of the shoot and how you're moving into position properly. Okay, so throughout this we'll teach a lot about footwork a little bit later on. Okay, and so we move into a few of the fundamentals. We've got elbow shoots, in this case quickly followed by a foot shoot, and again followed by a wrap. In this case it's around the neck. So we've got shoots, we've got body wraps and shoots. And quickly we move into the concept of a double sash training. You wouldn't normally do this with a meteor hammer or a rope dart, but it works with my weapons. It works with the classical meteor hammer if it's double weighted. But this isn't so common to find anymore. Okay, and you may also notice that that rope dart play and performance is full of a lot of complicated moves and what look like fancy tricks. Okay, this is for a few reasons. One is simply to become adept and skilled with the weapon. Another one is that as you start to practice with this, you involuntarily wind up getting wrapped and caught on occasion. And so a lot of the techniques for example, head turns, for elbow turns, for spins, all these things, they're techniques that you use when you accidentally get wound up. Okay, if you wind up hitting an object and the recoil is unpredictable, you need to be able to move out of the line of fire and move in such a way that you don't wind up getting wrapped and stuck by your own weapon. This is one of the reasons that soft weapons is considered the most challenging category of weaponry to learn, is because it's as dangerous to yourself as it is to an opponent if you're not skilled enough. And the other advantage is for a lot of the wraps and playful looking techniques is that when you tighten the circle, you're able to put a lot more force, centripetal force, into the movement of the sash, so that when you release it, if you tighten it around the elbow, if you tighten it around the knee, and then you shoot it out, you're generating a lot more speed and power in the technique than you previously had. Okay, so all of these together, plus the added advantage that when you wrap it around your body and you shoot it out, it's very difficult for an opponent or an observer to tell where it is and where it's coming from at each particular movement. So you wind up having a very, well, an element of surprise and deception with the weapon as well. Okay, so at the finish of this form, you see my best blue steel look. And then we wind up unwrapping it and going into what's called a weave. Okay, so we'll cover grips a little bit more very soon here, but to start, the explanation of the weave, just to make sense of it, starts like this. So I've got one hand gripping the end, the other hand is fed through, and it winds it up so that my wrist is bound. Okay, this might seem like a very odd way to hold this, but what happens is you wind up having a reserve tool that you can call on if needed, and you can ignore it if it's not needed. Obviously, the chances then of this getting grabbed or pulled could be dangerous to yourself, but for the most part, if you become competent with it, it winds up almost being like a third limb, and it adds a great deal of power and leverage to a technique. So we'll talk about this a bit more later on. Okay, and again, enter my training partner here. Chinese name is Zhang Ping, and I kid you not, his English name is Champion, and he definitely earned his name that day. Just so that you know, he's perfectly okay after this demonstration, but we prepared hard for it, okay? We spent at least 3 months preparing for this with just the techniques that are in the video so that he wouldn't get hurt on the day of shooting. We're going 100% on most of the techniques, and he knows how to fall from them to make it look right. Okay? All these techniques are real. Just because he's complying with me on the falls doesn't mean you can't use them. It simply means that we had to practice these so that I wouldn't be hurting him pretty severely throughout some of these techniques. Now the first one that we go into is a simple wrap and takedown. Okay, the leverage that the sash provides once it's wrapped around the neck is considerable. And as most martial artists know, the body is always going to follow the head. So in a very simple wrap like this, and a quick yank, the body is going to go right down in general, and it's also very painful, especially when it's wrapping the back of the neck with all those nerves and tendons. The choke here is self-explanatory. Unlike a lot of technique in a lot of martial arts, choking with a sash, a belt, or a rope is extremely easy. For whatever reason, the carotid arteries get collapsed, the trachea gets collapsed, everything just tightens up, and in a matter of seconds you can be choked out. If you train any of these techniques, do it with a trained partner and very slowly, because they'll be out in no time. Okay? And moving forward, we move into a category of strikes called pressing or popping. Now these techniques, I'm using it in 2 cases here. One is against a kick, or I'm using it as a kick defense. From the weave, a pop and a press is simply this kind of movement, okay? So it's not just pressing, but it's tightening as you extend the sash. Against a joint or against the inner thigh like this, it's not painful, but it adds a lot of force and pressure to it. If you again use a motion like this to strike the face or the neck, it's extremely painful and not fun. So after we drop him from the first technique, the second technique is an inner thigh press. Just a note, if you're doing a technique like this, a lot of martial artists like to come to the front of the knee or above the knee. This will hopefully tighten the tendons for the quadricep and extend the leg. I always like to come just inside the knee, on the inside of the thigh, because there's nothing that stabilizes the kneecap laterally when you strike this way. And as you can see, his knee buckles very quickly and he's not playing there. It's a very fast and aggressive takedown. To backtrack a second, the high block that I perform just ahead of time use the same popping and pressing movement to send that punch away. Okay, and so the next techniques that we have are locking and throwing techniques. The first technique, the outer wrist lock motion, is a very fast and aggressive takedown. If you start to train this technique, do it very slowly at first. But this gets into a category of what we'll talk about called intercepting the technique. The technique itself is not very complicated. It's not hard to do a stationary wrap if your opponent holds his arm out and to wrap the arm and to throw. But if somebody is punching at full speed, it's very difficult if you don't apply certain intercepting principles that are almost never taught. I had to find these the hard way through a lot of research and trial and error. And this particular one, the first one, uses a principle called sealing the technique, which means that I'm moving slightly against the retracting joint so that he can't pull his arm back. This is not indefinite, but it buys me maybe a split second that I can complete the circle and finish the lock. So the point here is that a lot of this is not about the techniques, but about the way that you're moving into the techniques that makes them effective. Okay, this next technique demonstrates the possibility of a grab and pull. Anytime that you're using a grip that binds your hands, like the weave, this is always a possibility. The sash can get pulled, stepped on, dragged, anything like this, and your body is going to go with it. You have the option, if it's not a tight weave, to simply let the sash go. In this case, I follow the pull and I step in with a headbutt. You could use a variety of techniques that are similar techniques that will loosen the grip or distract the person. But in all honesty, if they grab the sash and you know your locking techniques, it makes it very easy then to execute a binding lock. In this case, a high shoulder lock. It makes it easier than it does to intercept a punch. So after we catch him here, we redirect, and I could have continued the lock on the ground. Instead, I release it and crack him a little bit there. One of my clients likes to refer to my style of martial arts as the Fazio Kill Your Parents School of Martial Arts. I think this technique may have something to do with it. So the next one. As champion here throws a flurry of strikes, the idea is just to demonstrate that with certain grips, the sash or whatever you're using can be considered a reserve tool. It's not the focal point of the exchange. In this particular case, I only use it to hog tie him at the end there. Okay, now I'm not an expert in tying, which is why we quickly go through this and edit most of the action out. But if you're interested in this, and at some point I'll probably try to go back and complete the circle, but there's a Japanese system of rope tying as it relates to martial arts. I'm sure you could probably learn something from actual hog tying if you decide to make it out west in the States. But other than that, it may be just good for video demonstrations. So after that, I take him down, got no more use for that guy. The next technique, one of my first instructors was excellent at what you would call a fainting, yeah? Not passing out, but doing a technique that would draw the other person's attention, gaze, or guard in one direction or another. He would do it as simply as flinching, looking up, and the other person's hands would rise, their eyes would raise. And he was incredible at it. And you can do this with anything. And having another tool like this, you could treat the tool, in this case, as a distraction. And so this is a very simple way of simply getting them to flinch up. It's the same thing as when you're a kid having a snowball fight. You throw one snowball up, they look up, the next one comes straight at the gut, and they're not ready for it. Exact same principle. Okay, and as I turn here, I demonstrate slapping and snapping techniques. Now, if you ever went to high school and had a gym class, these should be second nature. Any jock that had a wet towel will probably beat the hell out of you with it at some point, and it's not that sophisticated. Anybody that tries to make it sophisticated is selling you something. It's as easy, just grab something, flick it a few hundred times, and you'll get the basic gist of how to do it. Now, if you want to do it well, you need to work on your targeting, and you need to work on understanding the materials used and possibly the penetration of the technique. But the movement itself, the mechanics, are not terribly complicated. just spend some time with them. Now the next technique, it's cut off a little bit here, but I'm feeding my hand through the Sash, also compliments of Monica Figlovich. This is a custom-made leather sash, beautiful leather. And what you can't see in the video there is that I'm feeding my hand through the loop and gripping it here. Now this is essentially a weave, but it's a loose weave. And the technique that follows, I'm still considering it a concept technique and not necessarily a practical self-defense tool, but it's something that you should consider and maybe drill it a bit, and maybe you can take it to levels that I haven't yet. But the idea is this: if you wrap a limb, you pull it through, it tightens like a noose around the opponent's hand, wrist, neck, anything like this, ankle. This has to be done pretty quick, and you have to use a material that does not stick, which is not easy to find. This sticks. A lot of the sashes that I train with, you wind up sweating a little bit. They stick as soon as they're wet. So you have to be very careful. If this is part of your strategy in self-defense, you need to know your materials well. But we move into what I'm calling a lasso throw. I think I made this one up. I didn't learn it anywhere. It applies the mechanics of a combination of an outer wrist lock, and the second punch adds an arm bar to it. Very difficult to fall out of and a bit painful. But it requires very high sensitivity about where your opponent is and how to move their joints at a range, because there's no contact with the body. So the sash essentially has to be like your hand on their wrist. And this takes a lot of practice and sensitivity to execute well. And once we wrap the head, we got a nice view over champion's eyeballs there. You don't always have to choke with this. A lot of binding techniques, if you remove the play of the body and you wrench the neck, it is unbelievably painful for the tendons and the nerves in the neck once you do that. If you do it quickly and hard enough, it's going to wind up with a dislocation or a break. Which again, a lot of these, treat them like they're principles of training. Don't go do this stuff to anybody. Train with it, have good serious partners, train hard, but don't break anybody's neck. And then I throw a flurry of kicks and throws against champion one more time. And then we wind up in the last series of strikes, which is the content of the first part of the DVD. Striking and whipping techniques. We've got a downward outside whip and then an inside whip there, sending him flying. And that covers at least the primary categories of soft weapons use. One note is that when you're practicing whipping techniques as independent techniques like I'm demonstrating them here, you need to hit stuff. If you're not hitting stuff, you have no idea how to use the weapon. Okay, for most of it, we understand, we practice the forms, you put them together, you learn the flow of the techniques. But if you're talking about self-defense, the whiplash or the backlash of the weapon after it makes contact with something is something you generally can't predict. It will bounce in all kinds of crazy ways. It can easily bounce back and hit you if you're not careful. So on a very fundamental level, if you want to get good at this, you have to hit stuff. Try not to make it a human being, yeah, but hit trees, punching bags, all this kind of stuff to learn how to execute these techniques well. Okay, I think we've covered most of the demonstration. Let's move on to some technique study here. Okay, before we start training, we need to prep the sash a bit. Now, whether you're using mine or anything else out there, this is not terribly complicated. We grip it. We wrap the hand a few times until ideally the length of the remaining sash is somewhere, if you hold the tip of it here to the shoulder, the end of it should be around kneecap level. Okay, that's my preferred length. Some of the traditional stylists prefer a little bit longer chain whip, and some more modern martial arts styles prefer a shorter one. All of these are okay. It doesn't matter too much. But the key point is I find this is a pretty good length, at least in terms of power, balance, and speed of the weapon. Now for the long sash, also similar to a rope dart, we grip it in the non-dominant hand. This we call the anchor. Wrap it a few times. Now the length of this one should be approximately, if both of my arms are extended fully out, if I'm holding the other end of the sash in the right palm, now the length of it again should be from palm at shoulder level to kneecap. Okay, the difference there is that you have the extra wingspan of both arms extended outward. Okay, so we're moving into fundamental technique training with the sash. Before we get started, one of the most important principles, I call it the wheel principle, but it's essentially the idea of keeping the sash as close to your body as possible. It's this idea that if you take a wheel on a carriage or a car or anything like this, and you start to turn it off its axis, eventually it's going to hit something. It's going to wind up hitting the insides of the car, or it's going to wind up hitting something to the outside. The sash is exactly the same, okay? And the hand is the axis point. Once that sash starts to turn a little bit off the center, it very quickly winds up wrapping a head, a neck, a limb, anything very fast. So the key is to keep it as close as possible. And with the first technique, we can move into that right now. The focal point of training this exercise over and over again is essentially to learn to keep the sash very close to you throughout this 4-swing combination. Okay, so to break it down, the first part of it is to keep the arm extended, which is also great for strengthening and conditioning the arm for the general sash play. But you keep it extended and just a light rotation inside and outside. Now you should aim to essentially keep it close enough to graze your nose on the front side of your body and almost graze your back on the back side. So very close. Okay, then when we add the next step, we've got in, out, and then we roll it on the outside again. At this point, you should already be rotating your hips to the front while the sash then follows and almost grazes along the back. Okay, and the last addition to it is once it comes to the inside, then you tighten it up a little bit, catch it, and rotate. So it's not the elbow that's doing the work, and it's not the hand on the tricep that's doing the work, it's the hips. You should not even need to use this hand, and you should use very little elbow movement to bring the sash back to the back side of your body. Okay, now even though this is a continuous type of movement, you should consider the striking possibilities of the exercise, okay? Essentially, it's 4 downward strokes all passing through the same line. If you cannot come through a center line, either hit a piece of paper or a ball that is hanging from something, it should be able to hit that same line with all 4 strokes, even though the fourth technique is a bit closer in, okay? This is a fundamental in most Shaolin chain whip forms, and you should drill it to death. Treat it as meditation, start with it every time you practice, and it will teach you everything that you need to know about the fundamentals of the art. Okay, so the next sequence we have is very basically just turning the sash. In this case, not using the hand anymore, but using the elbow or the tricep as a pivot point. The general theory of turning now, and if you don't understand this, you're not going to be able to transition very easily into more advanced techniques like leg turns, knee turns, head turns, a lot of these things. But they all have the same fundamentals. They're not that complicated. You just need to understand that in order to turn the sash, you're creating a new pivot point. Okay, you're taking your hand out of play, and you're allowing another point of the body to essentially act as the hand for a few seconds. Okay, so once contact is made, now the sash has a new end to it, and you need to allow it to operate as if this was the hand. Now, once I have this pivot point, if I don't move, it will wind up wrapping my arm. It's the same thing around the legs, same thing around the neck. So what we need is a moving pivot point. As soon as there's contact made, I allow contact, and I move with the direction of the sash. That together allows it to turn. And this is the fundamental principle for all turns, essentially. So if you're having trouble, if you're getting wrapped up or tied up, come back to figure out and answer those questions. What's the contact point that's acting as the new hand? And what is moving? How are you moving it from one point to another in order to release release the sash and keeping it from binding? Okay, so the next one is simply moving on the inside and the outside of the elbow, or the tricep more accurately. I call it an elbow turn, but you're allowing it to touch the tricep. Now again with this one, focus on moving the sash from front to back with the hips more so than the arm. The arm is going to have a bit more play in this one than the previous one, but you should still use the hips to transfer the sash from the front to the back. The next two techniques that we're going to look at are the arm scoop and the shoulder turn. The arm scoop is it's a pretty attractive technique. I think it's worth learning. It doesn't do much technically, but it can add a bit of speed to the movement, and it looks quite interesting once it's thrown into the mix of techniques. The basic idea is that you have a straight new pivot point, but it doesn't spin much. It catches the sash and assists it. It throws it a little bit more quickly from the front to the back of your body. Now the key is not to keep your left arm on a straight line in front of the body, but to throw it behind you to your right shoulder. If you pivot at the same time, you'll wind up spinning it behind you, and this will allow you to keep it, again, vertical instead of off its axis and hitting you in the back of the leg, which is quite common. Now the next technique is the shoulder turn. Again, we're using the shoulder as the pivot point, and the hand will stay down and relaxed. Once it touches the shoulder, you allow it to come close to the back, twist the hips, and this will turn the sash back to the front side of the body and release it. Now these two techniques work great as a drill. Okay, you can put them together, work front to back, arm scoop, shoulder turn, drill it and drill it and drill it, just working from a solid stance, and they should come together pretty well. Okay, next we have a moving drill, so a little bit of footwork added, and we've got two elbow turns. Now the first one is a new one we'll do. As the sash is in a front spin, or coming down in front of you this way, you'll extend your elbow, allow it to begin to wrap, keep the fist and the knuckles tight against the ribs. As soon as the sash comes down, you'll turn again with the hips, roll with it, and release it to the back side. This technique is difficult to do well. It's not hard to learn, but to do well, you have to be extremely sensitive to the movement of the sash, and your body should blend with it very smoothly. It's not about catching it and throwing it behind you, but you should receive it smoothly, roll with it, and allow it to unwind behind you. Okay, so we're going to put this one together with the elbow turn that we already learned, which is from the first sequence, which is catching it from an upswing. We catch it here and throw it to the back. Okay, the left foot only is going to move, stepping forward, stepping around again, completing a full circle. And with this one step and with these two techniques, you start to complete a continuous circle and turning from both sides. Okay, next we're going to move into the upward swing. Now for this technique, we need to try to focus on keeping the sash very close to the body. If the hands start to move too far to the outside, you're going to wind up getting whacked in the back of the legs. So even at top speed, the hands should never move too far to the outside of the body, and we want to keep them pretty close to the center line at about upper chest level or throat level. And notice that the hips and the feet, the weight shifting from foot to foot just slightly, is where most of the power and the control comes for this technique. Okay, and the last of the fundamental sash striking techniques, we've got a very basic horizontal strikes. We've got an inside strike and an outside strike. Now, in traditional martial arts, these usually aren't practiced independently. These are always found within a form. But if you're interested in the self-defense applications of these techniques, it's very helpful to practice them from a dead stop, because more likely than not, if you have a soft weapon, you'll need to very quickly move from a static position into an all-out strike. And this is the footwork and mechanics of how to move into that. With each one of these, if I'm striking outside to inside, I step with the right leg, assuming I'm using my right hand. And if I'm striking inside to outside, I step with the left leg. Okay, putting these together in a drill is quite helpful because you can roll from one stop with the footwork and momentum into the next one. Now the key with this is not just swinging through, but you need one swing as a preparatory swing that gets the sash high enough, and it's on the second strike that you should be able to hear that buzz or that pop or that whooshing sound through the center line. Okay, if you can hear the sound and acceleration of the sash through the right point, you're probably executing a decent whip. If it's constant, then your energy is dispersed all throughout the motion, and it's probably not a very valid strike. Now, it's very difficult actually to stop a horizontal strike. We'll look at those stops a little bit later, but for now, simply practice with the non-dominant hand catching it and keeping it from hitting your body. With a soft weight, this is not a very big deal, but once you start to use something dense, heavy, or sharp, you can't let it touch you. It hurts like hell. So you have to practice keeping it away from the body, receiving it softly so that you can rebound and then send it going the other way. Okay, time for everybody's most dreaded topic for most of these tutorials, footwork. The longer that I practice martial arts, the more I come to realize how important footwork is. For the first 10, admittedly, for the first 10 some odd years of my training, I didn't appreciate it that much. I began to understand it a little bit after 8 years. I mean, footwork to the extent that if your feet are not grounded, if you're not well balanced, and if you're not moving properly, you can always hit something, you can always kick something, but it is not going to be killing power unless you're rooted in the ground. And this is the case even with a soft weapon and something as flexible as a sash. You need to have strong and intelligent footwork if you're going to execute a killing strike with something as flexible as this weapon. We'll go through a few different types of stepping footwork, and you'll notice a lot of them don't look like martial arts footwork. A lot of it will look like dance almost. A little bit of gliding footwork where in some cases you're lifting a little bit onto the ball of your feet and then gliding down to a lower base. It's a bit flighty, okay? And then some of the other footwork, like when we stop the sash, winds up being quite grounded. The most important thing that when you're practicing this, and you should be drilling footwork as an independent skill. Don't only treat it like it's something that you do with the sash. If you want to get good, put the sash down, go out into a long field, and do footwork drills up and down that field until you can't walk anymore. It will work. It's not going to be necessarily fun, but you'll get good this way. And the keys are to make sure that you always spot your target. You should find a line, maintain a straight line for all these techniques. If you're losing your line, the sash is going to be losing its line and you're going to get hit and wrapped up. So it's essential that you're spotting your target. If you're spinning or turning, your eyes go from the target right back onto the target as quickly as possible. You don't look behind you, you don't look out to the side. That's the essence of spinning well. And if you haven't seen good spinning, you can see advanced martial arts training. Also look at figure skating, look at gymnastics. Okay, they are the best spinners out there and they spot better than anybody else.
It's rolling.
Okay, with the upward swing, the footwork is quite synchronized with the sash itself. We're going to put weight onto the same foot when the sash is leading toward that side. And you want to make sure that you are feeling the flow from the lower body up toward the sash. The sash should be an extension of the coordination created by the feet. Now with horizontal striking, whether we're swinging to the inside or the outside, you should feel the hips and the footwork lead the movement, and you should feel a bit of a stretch and tension up through the body that you need to release in terms of extending the whip. Now you don't swing the whip with the arm. The arm is just an extension of the power that you're generating from the hips. So there should be a bit of a lag, and the arm provides that last bit of snap and power through the target. Now you notice again that the footwork for the horizontal striking is again quite straight, even though the segues in between here are a bit sloppy for me because of the limited space. So make sure that when you're doing this that you're staying on the same line throughout. And again, I said it before, but I think it's worth repeating, is that if there's one distinguishing trait between soft weapons training as a martial art and modern poi and fire spinning, it's in the footwork. Okay, I think that there's going to be in the coming years, a very strong connection between the martial arts side of things and the performance side of things in terms of the fire spinning and other arts. But the distinguishing trait, and martial artists will always look for this, it's not how well you spin or you play the sash, it's always going to be what the body is doing behind it. That's a defining attribute of somebody that is a master of the art and somebody that is playing or performing. Okay, we're moving into some more exciting techniques now, some intermediate turning. We've got three different types. We've got head turns, what do we got? Leg turns and knee turns. These all have the same fundamental principle again of having a different pivot point, and they also have the advantage of looking pretty cool. Now the main reason for studying a couple of these, in particular the head turns, is not just that they make what you're doing a whole lot flashier, but every student that I've tried to work with on these techniques at some point wraps the sash around their head accidentally or their neck and gets hit in the face. I did too when I started, and it happens to everybody. But the better that you get it, and if you practice these techniques, once the sash, if it's off its course, if it starts to wrap a limb, you spontaneously know how to move your body and turn in such a way to release the tension and untwine. That's the value of learning these techniques. Soft weapons are not, again, not like hard style weapons. With a staff, you've got a beginning and an end to a technique. With a soft weapon, I can swing to here, but it's going to continue on its course until it hits something or until I stop it gracefully. So it's essential that you learn how to constantly be in movement as well, to move with the sash. It's not as simple as learning a series of individual strikes. This is an oversimplification of the art. Okay. So the key to head turns. Um, these are not hard to execute if you just have the courage to stick your head in the middle of the sash and then turn a little bit. However, what makes one a good head turn versus somebody that's throwing the sash around is again in the footwork. Okay, so if you watch my lines in my footwork, once the sash starts to wrap my neck, I don't twine it and throw it over to the other side. I move my body, okay? I step very aggressively forward with my feet and I twist my hips. My head will do a little bit of movement, but if you're watching my head, you're watching the wrong part. Okay, the body will tell the story of how to, again, release the twine and let it go on the other side. So you should work to make that footwork strong, sound, and aggressive in order to have a much more confident and speedy head turn. And again, this is an essential technique. You need to practice your head turns for safety reasons and not just because they look cool. Okay, this one's a little more challenging to learn. From a clockwise spin in front of the body, you have to wrap a little bit more than from the previous one. So you let the sash wrap a little bit longer around the neck, and then you need to spin after it's almost has 180 degree or a full circle wrap around the neck is when you turn and then release it to the other side. Okay, the next one is a modified head turn into an elbow turn. We initiate a head turn, so the head enters the sash, and rather than stepping forward, we catch the sash along its path with the elbow, remove the head, and reverse direction. It's not easy one. It's not an easy one to explain here. There's not a lot of footwork involved. You're probably going to have to experiment with this and try it a bit. And it's not as bad as it looks, but it's a little bit difficult to tell clearly what's happening here. But you want to make sure that as the sash comes down across the back of the head toward the bottom, then you want to insert the elbow at that point, remove the head, and reverse direction. Now, with leg turns, I don't know if you need these kinds of turns, but they're pretty flashy and deceptive, and well, they're fun. Now, when you practice them, though, it's pretty important that you get your leg above waist level. Okay, if you can't do that, stretch for a few months. I've had a lot of students, and there's no reason to fall back on being inflexible to not being able to execute a technique. If you care about this craft, if you want to get good at it, don't make excuses. Put the time in. Get yourself to a reasonable level of flexibility and learn the techniques properly. If your leg is waist level or lower, you're going to wind up wrapping it. If your leg starts to have an angle above 90 degrees, it's very easy then for it to catch and glide and not wind up wrapping the leg. Okay? It's this case for both the inside and the outside leg turn. And the final one with the knee turn, along with the leg turn, you want to have a very tight center and circle. The leg turn, you can get away with it without it being super tight, but with the knee turn, you have to have a very tight center, a bent knee, and spin on the spot. This is a separate skill than just playing with the sash. You need to practice and be good at spinning as an independent thing. in order to execute the technique well. And another good drill here with the knee turn is to incorporate the shoulder turn at the end of it. This makes for a much faster circle, and it's faster than it would be if you don't use the shoulder. So you catch it with the knee, and as it's coming up from the other side, you just let it drift over the shoulder and turn it again with the hips. By now, you've gained enough knowledge to get pretty hurt using this weapon. It's time to learn how to stop it. Okay. Now, you always have to keep in mind that just because you stop doesn't mean the sash will. It's going to continue on and on. And so it's essential that you learn how to stop it gracefully, and also that you're aware of where it is at all times so that you can stop it in some cases without seeing it. A few of the stops that I'll teach you are not visible. Some of them come from behind the back, and you have to be sensitive and feel that line that's happening. This is happening at a split second, but how and where it's touching the back so that you can catch it properly with the forearm extended. In another case, we have a stop where it wraps around the neck and you catch it with the same hand. This is also a blind catch, but after some practice, you'll become sensitive to it and get a good feeling of where to catch it. Okay, when you're stopping an inside slash with a simple catch, it's very difficult if you watch somebody do it at full speed to see exactly where they're meeting it. Okay, it looks as if they're catching it near the end of the sash, but the key to this technique is actually coming very close and almost meeting the hand with the sash and then sliding it out to extension very quickly. To somebody watching, it's very difficult to tell at which point the hand is making contact, but it will allow you to have much more control and accuracy with the stop. If you miss it with that hand, it's going to wrap you again and wind up smacking you somewhere around the midsection. And when we work to the outside horizontal swing, which eventually will continue, wrap the neck into the catch, you want to make sure that you're not sacrificing the technique for the stop or for the catch. A lot of people, when they learn this, they start throwing slop because they're thinking and worried about actually catching it. If you can't perform the first whip properly, don't worry about the stop yet. Go back, work on your horizontal swings. Once you're competent with that, make sure that you're whipping properly with a full extension of the arm. Extend the arm, and after the sash is at full extension, then gradually start to bring your arm back in to catch it at the last minute. You don't swing the arm up overhead like a lasso and then try to catch it. Always rely on the fundamental technique, add to it the stop afterwards. And the last stop is more of a classical wushu stop, if you will. Now, from a down or a front swing or a counterclockwise swing, The key with this one is the hand passes, starts to pass from down over to the front part of the swing. You're going to lift your elbow and actually follow the course of the sash. This is going to help you slow down the sash and almost make it look like it's stalling or slowing down throughout its course. And the idea is that it comes to a full rest just above the ground where it stops, and is supposed to stop at full length and quite gracefully. You can shoot back the opposite leg to counterbalance the force and extend the body or straighten the body outward to work on beautiful lines. Okay, a little bit more advanced footwork and/or turning combinations. Once you start moving the sash well in a vertical line, sometimes you may need to transition into a horizontal line. This is not terribly complicated, but it is not easy to do with a powerful whip. Okay, so we're going to look at that a little bit. Unfortunately, this is very difficult to break down verbally. I'm going to try to demonstrate it as best I can for you and probably use a few subtitles to hit a few key points. But again, essentially you want to make sure that the sash, while it's vertical, is very close to your body. And once you start to turn, your body needs to create space between you and the sash in order to extend it and create a strong whip. Okay, so the first turn uses inside turning or inside stepping footwork that we've covered. And we'll start with our basic four-swing pass. And one of the keys to the turn is to make sure that the body leads the sash into the spin. Meaning that when you begin to step and lead with your left foot around your back, when you start to turn, that the sash doesn't turn with you yet. The sash is still moving along the backside of your body. And then that resistance is what generates the power in the whip, and what allows you to turn it off its vertical axis onto the horizontal axis. And the second footwork drill sends our vertical spin into a horizontal spin coming from the counterclockwise vertical spin. And the key to this technique is, again, to begin with a tight, close sash, to lead the back step with the hips and the feet, and to allow the arm to lag a bit. So with all of these turns, going from a vertical spin into a horizontal spin, you need to first move the body ahead of the sash. Let the sash lag, keep the arm relaxed, and once you feel tension and torque created throughout the body, you release that through the whip. So if you come too early with the whipping element, then you're going to wind up using muscular force, and it's going to be slow and not too pretty. And here's how we put it together with an elbow turn to initiate the first step and make it a little bit more complex. And here in the demo, you can see it at full speed. Okay, we're moving now into a few advanced techniques. I can't say that there's a great deal of practicality involved in learning these techniques. If you're a fan of the art and if you love to train, learn them. They'll only improve your sensitivity and your agility with the art. If you're focused more on self-defense applications, I don't particularly think they're going to add a great deal of value for you. But you should practice them if you can. And if you love the art, you should practice them until you can do them well, because they will add an awful lot of ability to your game. Once you can do these techniques, everything prior to that becomes a whole lot easier. And if you can get these down, they tend to look pretty good and help you create pretty complex forms. Okay, the first technique here is my own as far as I know. It's a combination of, well, a jump and a inner leg turn. Once you understand the leg turn well, this is not too bad. You just need to try to commit to the jump itself and make sure that you don't stop the rotation before you've spun 180 plus degrees in the air. The next movement is whipping the sash underneath a tornado kick. If you don't have a practice tornado kick, this is not going to go very far, but I break it down very quickly here for you to train that kick independently, which is simply to have a direct line to make sure that your feet are throwing a spinning crescent kick followed by an inside crescent kick, but that the feet remain on the same line. So whereas in Taekwondo and a lot of systems, this kick is done with one focal point in front of you representing a target, in Kung Fu, these kicks are done behind you, and they allow your footwork to stay on the same line. And this is crucial if you're going to be throwing the whip underneath you. And you can do it slowly, as I'm doing it here. And next we're going to look at the classical wushu technique, the butterfly. And the butterfly technique, again, is, well, it's considered a wushu fundamental, but I think most people that practice martial arts would consider it a challenging technique. The key to learning the technique is to bring the body from a low posture, sweeping down, throwing up that first leg, that right leg, as hard as you can, while putting the body horizontally. And, well, throwing yourself into the air about 1,000 times and falling about half of that, and you'll have it. And once you have the sash should help create the momentum and swing underneath the legs as you're jumping. And last we have rolling with the sash. It's certainly possible to keep the sash in play while rolling, as long as your rolling technique sends the same side hand and foot together at the same time. Some people cross over. They'll step left and they'll lead right hand, and they'll twist the body. For this technique to work, you need to lead with the same hand and foot at the same time, and you need to use that lead hand to swing and guide the sash underneath you as you roll. So you don't actually roll over the sash, you roll beyond it, and this allows you, once you roll further, to stand up with the sash and continue to swing it horizontally. Okay, we're moving now into the double sash. For me, this is still, I would put this in the category of a bit academic study of the weapon. I don't think it's terribly practical, but I practice it, I love it, it's a lot of fun, and it teaches you where you have gaps in your fundamental training to a certain extent. For most of these, they are not separate techniques. They're just built up of combining fundamental techniques together. So in order to do this well, before you move on to the double sash, make sure that you are very proficient in one hand with the single sash, and then start to at least go back and review all of the fundamentals and the basics with the non-dominant hand. Without this, you're not going to be able to control and use two at a time, because it is actually very difficult for your mind to grasp what is happening with both sashes at the same time. So you need to be able to think very quickly. You need to be able to rely on the fundamentals. If one sash is passing on the front side of your body and the other behind, and you have to turn them both at the same time, this is a pretty complex technique. If you have to think about it too much, it means that your fundamentals are probably not ready for the double sash. Now, on a side note, again, I wouldn't consider this practical self-defense or fighting training. However, I think it's worth discussing at least that if you go back and you look at the traditional Shaolin forms, double sash training is incredibly fast and aggressive. And this at least tells you the motivation behind the techniques. Okay, a lot of old Shaolin forms contain running, jumping, flipping, rolling. And the idea is that these are evasive maneuvers and fast blitzing techniques that would be used against multiple opponents in probably war or on the battlefield. Okay, these are not self-defense techniques per se, but battleground techniques, striking multiple opponents, moving very quickly from one spot to another. And in this context, you could consider double sash training as a last resort kind of blitzing or giving it everything you got, if you had to consider it in the self-defense spectrum. In doing this, there is no defensive element, only offense. When you're using two sashes, you need to blitz very quickly, you need to swing hard, and you have to try to cut down just about anything that you can pretty rapidly, because eventually you're going to get tied up and caught. It's very difficult to control and maintain. And as soon as you make impact with the first sash on anything that's solid, the whole thing is a wash, or it can be anyway, because with the recoil and the backlash, you can't predict what's going to happen next. So again, treat it like it's academic training. It's a lot of fun. You will grow from it. You'll learn from it. But if you're looking for practical self-defense, I can't argue for that just now. Yeah. Okay, the first double sash technique is, I think, traditionally known as the flower. It's 2 vertical swings, both downward swings. And we want with this one, if you notice the hand position, it's quite high. It's in front of the chest or chin, and it's quite tight. Okay, so there's not a lot of room between the 2 hands. And this is because the further away that they are, and the further the distance, the more easy it is for you to, again, turn the sash off its vertical axis and wind up wrapping your body with one or the other. So it's crucial in double sash play, especially in vertical swinging, that your hands remain quite close and they don't extend too far from one another and too far beyond the shoulder. And if we break it down, we can start with 1 swing on each side of the body, and you can gradually start to swing 1 sash over the other and then unwind them. This is the easiest way to start. Once this becomes comfortable, we want to work into a 3 swing series on each side of the body. Okay, there's a lot of movement here, so it's difficult again to break down verbally, but start with 1 swing on each side of the body, add 2 swings, and build from there. And the next one is looking at 2 upswings, or double sash play for the upswing. I have to admit, this is not my my prettiest technique, but I wanted to include it in here because it certainly fits into the spectrum of double sash play. And again, we keep the hands very tight. The stance and the footwork is a bit odd because you almost collapse the body a little bit. The knees need to remain quite bent, and this is for the sake of progressive footwork so that you can walk in the same way that when we worked the initial upswing, we had flat feet for the most part when we were walking, and the knees were quite bent. Okay, for the double sash horizontal swing, we start with the hand farthest from the direction that we're moving. So we start with the outside hand, which initiates the swing, and from there we whip out the lower arm that comes from a low posture into the high whip, and we finish with both arms extended in the other direction. And here's a turning drill you can play with. On the one side, we're using an elbow turn, and on the other side, we're using an inside, simply an inside turn where the sash passes under the armpit. And then on the back side of the turn, so these are 2 different types of turns depending on which way the sash is spinning. Coming back the other way, we're using a elbow turn and a shoulder turn at the same time. And the next technique, we're going to move from the front swing with 2 sashes, the vertical swing, into the horizontal swing. So this is simply combining the first technique that we looked at with the finish of the horizontal swing. And this one is challenging at first. You'll definitely need to go back and review your movement from the one-handed vertical swing into the horizontal swing in order to make this work well. Okay, and here we are with a more elaborate version of moving from a vertical into a horizontal swing with the double sash. We're initiating it with a head turn, and midway through we're using the tornado kick. And here we have moving from a vertical swing into the horizontal swing, moving to the back side of the body or using a back step. This one again needs to be reviewed quite a lot with a single sash before you can move on to the double. And here we have the two sashes moving in different directions at the same time. And we're simply using two different elbow turns for it. This one is a bit confusing when you start, and I don't have a lot of particular advice for it. I think you just need to drill with both hands the fundamental turns, and then when you feel confident, start to put them together. Next we have the head turn within the double sash. The key for the timing in this is to make sure that when the left hand passes to the back side of the body, that's when the head catches the sash on the inside of the body. And when the left hand starts to pass back to the inside, then the right hand and the sash turned by the head is moved over the left hand. And this is accompanied with a step at the same time. And the next technique, the double knee shoot, is also my own technique as far as I know. And this technique stems from what we're going to cover next, which is the long sash technique. It's a fundamental knee shoot, but we're going to be using both knees in this case in very quick succession. And the idea is that we're doing very rapid strikes. We're taking both sashes out of play temporarily to shoot them at a close opponent using the knees. And you need to break this down and work on a single knee shoot before you can move them in. And then the footwork is very similar to what you might find in a jump front kick in Taekwondo, where you throw one knee up and then the other leg kicks. But in this case, we're simply throwing up both knees and catching the sash at the same time. Okay, and the last technique we're going to look at is, not sure what you may call it, but you may call it a double shoot or a double pop, with both sashes on the outside of the body. They could be simultaneous, they could be in alternating succession. You want to have a slight lag as the sashes pass behind you, and then you flick both wrists or hands out toward the target. The advantage or the idea behind this technique is that we're hiding the sash behind the body, and it shoots straight out over the shoulder directly to the target. So it's no longer moving in a clean vertical circular pass. We're taking it out of that vertical line and sending it straight out head on at the target. Okay, we're on now to the long sash. Included in these techniques are the fundamentals of all long-range soft weapons. So you'll find the foundation for meteor hammer training, for rope dart training. They all contain the same fundamentals. Before we move into the techniques of them, there's one concept that I want to talk about a little bit. And this exists in the old soft weapons training, and it exists in present-day wushu or kung fu training. And it's a difference between if you could look at it this way toward a forceful strike and a strike that occurs from a chain ball sickle. Okay, so if you watch, for example, a Japanese or a Korean brick breaker, you can see the way that the mechanics of the movement crush the bricks, and you can see the follow through of the movement. It's essentially like hitting something with a baseball bat. Now, if you watch an internal Chinese martial artist, for example, an iron palm practitioner, they'll be able to send the force of the strike deep into a stack of bricks to break the bottom brick, to break the central brick. Um, and it's simply the fact that this is not crushing, forceful striking. It's allowing the energy to transfer and to pass through deeply into an object. And if you were to take, for example, on the one hand, representing maybe more hard style Korean and Japanese arts, striking something with a baseball bat, and then if you were to take a chain ball sickle, a chain with a heavy ball at the end of it, and flick it or swing it, it's going to penetrate, but it's not going to drive through in the same way that a baseball bat would. It's going to hit, and the power and the force is going to hit deep inside, and it's just going to feel like it tears your insides out. This is also similar in terms of the striking technique. Gong Fu striking is the exact same way. When you strike with a Gong Fu technique, oftentimes it's very loose and fluid, and it doesn't look like there's a lot behind it, but it hurts inside in a way that a lot of other techniques, external techniques, don't. And so this is one of the fundamental striking principles. Now, to make this work with a shoot, and a shoot is anytime you wrap a limb and send the sash out at a long distance in a straight line, you don't just throw it, okay? You have to, at the end, at the extension, you pop it and you tighten in the same way that you would snap a punch, okay? Same concept. So when the ball is extending, you extend along with it, and then you pop it back, and it has the same effect of digging and pulling out, creating a cavity in the body, and then leaving a vacuum. Yeah, it's very painful. So a lot of the techniques then that we'll do with this, you'll see that I brace with it by bringing my body along with the sash and maybe using my bottom leg as a counter force or counterbalance. This allows me to extend with the sash and pop it back. Okay, so the power and speed of the weapon now is not just the force that's thrown out, but it's how your body stabilizes and braces the entire movement. This is the fundamental of all shoots, and it needs to be understood before they can be effective. In my approach to soft weapons training, I don't add a lot of footwork to the long sash. There's one piece of footwork that we will look at and go over, but for the most part, I borrow most of the footwork from intermediate range whipping and striking that you find in some of the Shaolin chain whip forms. Now, traditional rope dart work and meteor hammer work does contain things like running, sprinting, jumping. I incorporate a little bit of this, but I don't think it's useful to focus on it because the more that you're moving, the less time you have to react and create a new wrap and a new shoot. And I think that it's important that when you study this, you need to be able to adapt and move very quickly. Being able to run half the room and then shoot it out assumes that you have incredible control over your environment and that you really understand where everybody is at all times. And I think that this is a little bit of a big assumption. Doesn't mean you shouldn't train these skills. It just means that for me, I've chosen not to focus on too many of those. Most of my footwork is a little bit more concentrated and localized. Okay, so the addition that we have here is a simple turn, simply progressing forward, wrapping as I'm moving forward from the outside of one elbow to the outside of the other. This has only one advantage, which is to tighten the spin. When I'm using the full length of the sash, it just takes longer if I'm only using my hand. But once I wrap the elbow, it's a much tighter and a much faster spin. And each of these catches can then be used to wrap and shoot behind me or shoot forward, or without the wrap, simply to shoot behind. Okay? Okay, we're going to look now at fundamental shoots. These are a lot of fun to practice, and not terribly difficult to learn. They all have the same fundamentals again, which is that as you begin to wrap a limb, okay, whereas before with the sash play, we would do a partial wrap and a turn to release it. Now when we're working on shoots, we want a full 360-degree wrap, in some cases twice that, full 360-degree wrap, and then we release the tension by extending the limb toward the target. Okay, so that's the primary difference between turning, as we saw in the sash play, and shooting out. Now, from the perspective of an opponent or an onlooker, this has a very interesting effect because you've got the sash at one length. All of a sudden now it's tightening up around a certain limb, and it creates distance between you and your opponent. And this is very strange because the threat is moving away from them, but at the same time it's quickening the pace of the weapon, and it's preparing for a much harder and direct shot that comes out. And so this is one of the reasons it's a very interesting weapon to play with, because it's very hard to predict, it's hard to see where it's going, and it's hard to know exactly what point a strike is going to occur. You can't really tell it from normal body mechanics, and the truth is, I don't need to release it necessarily. I could just turn, or I could allow that extra half a circle and shoot it. So there are a lot of options once you get comfortable with it that you can adjust kind of in mid-swing and alter the course. Now the three that we're going to look at are a few different versions of the elbow shoot, and we've got 2 foot shoots and then knee shoots. None of them are terribly complex, but it's important to remember on all of them that we catch not directly on the side, but if here's my center line coming toward the camera, I want to catch the sash for the most part at my front angle, okay? So if I'm wrapping and I want to catch the elbow, it's going to be catching up here and shooting straight ahead. Same thing with the foot and the same thing with my knee. Now with foot shoots, we catch closer to the ball of the foot. You don't want to catch it in the center of the heel. That'll pretty quickly result in you wrapping your own foot instead of sending it out. And the same thing, the foot has to remain flexible, the ankle has to remain flexible, and you extend and point the toes toward the target to release that circle. The knee is probably the easiest of the bunch in terms of wrapping and shooting it. The problem is the accuracy of it is very difficult to predict. So you have to train this technique a lot and really get comfortable extending your leg and shooting the knee straight at the target. First, we're going to look at the rear elbow shoot. This is probably the most fundamental of long sash shoots. Once the sash starts to pass underneath the elbow, you let it loop about 360 degrees. You should shoot the left foot back at the same time as a counterbalance. And when the sash reaches close to full length, you want to pop and pull the other end of it. This creates more of an internal punch that you'd find in wushu and kung fu arts, but it's essential for a much more powerful snap and control of the sash. And next we've got a forward shoot. This one we can start from an upswing. Again, wrap it once around the elbow, and when the sash is circling downward toward the front, you extend the elbow and twist the hips forward, ideally stepping at the same time. This is one of the easier shoots to become quite accurate with, and it's well worth learning for that reason. You'll notice here that the angle that I'm throwing is generally a bit high, and some people have commented that it looks like I'm throwing it too high most of the time. On the one hand, the camera angle is a little bit lower than it should be, which makes the sash look higher. But the other point is that you shouldn't look at where the sash ends as the striking point necessarily. In the same way that when you punch or that you kick, you generally don't strike the surface of an opponent, but you drive through with force. And here you should be seeing that the same way, that the contact point is not necessarily at the peak, but somewhere along that path. And the sash continues on along up through the target. And the last elbow shoot is not particularly one of my favorites, but it's a classical shoot and well worth learning. It's simply from a downward spin. You apply the same principles as in the previous shoot. Now, for the most part, as soon as the sash starts to wrap your body, you cannot allow it to have more slack. So at the point at which it begins to roll over my arm, I can't allow any more slack to come from my left and right hand to extend this sash. I need to keep it tight because that's what will increase the speed of the weapon and allow me to control its circle at that point. There's one exception, which is a double elbow wrap, which I can, if I want, allow it to connect once, loosen the slack, allow it to wrap one time, and then tighten it, allowing it to wrap a second time. It applies the same principle, only it's the second wrap where I'm applying the principle to. The first one I allow it to lengthen before it tightens twice. Okay, some of the keys to shooting the sash with your foot. A lot of people make the mistake of catching the sash somewhere in the middle of the foot toward the heel. This is going to provide a lot less accuracy, and it's also going to make the sash or the soft weapon stick a little bit. It's much more ideal to catch the sash toward the center to front of the foot, closer to the ball of the foot. And the key to targeting with this is to point the toes exactly toward the target. So you don't just flick the leg or kick the sash. You let it slightly wrap, and then you extend the toes toward your target as you're ready to release. And that's where the accuracy comes from. And knee shoots are probably one of the easier shoots to learn. The most important key point, perhaps, is simply to extend the hips along with the shoot itself. So where the hips remain slightly back for the foot shoot, and they only extend as the shoot occurs, the hips are responsible for actually sending the sash out in this case. So you need to make sure the whole body turns and the knee extends toward the target. You'll also notice there's a slight flick of the foot, almost like you're kicking toward the end. That also helps release the sash at the right time. Okay, we're moving on now to body wraps and shoots. Now, if there was a deceptive element for normal shoots, elbow shoots, foot shoots, that is tremendously enhanced once you start talking about body wraps, because now it's not just wrapping a limb and projecting. Now I've got it wrapped around my body and it's disguised entirely. So most of the shoots that come from this position are totally blind. My body actually hides the direction and the projection then of the dart from me. Okay, so if I've got it wrapped here and I throw it under the arm and over, you don't actually see it. My hand is not throwing it, my elbow is not throwing it, it's coming from nothing behind me, straight out toward the opponent. So these are very fun to practice. They're visually very aesthetic and interesting to watch. But if you look at them from a self-defense or a fighting application, that's their value. They're incredibly deceptive and hard to understand and hard to see from somebody else's perspective. Now, the key to learning these well, or even creating new techniques, is to, in a sense, reverse engineer the shoot. So if you say that I want the shoot to come from this part of my body, or I want it to come over the head or under the leg, throw it out there, pull it back, and do the whole thing in reverse. If you know you want it to come over this right shoulder, well, start by bringing it the other way, wrapping your body a certain way, and then figure out where it needs to start and how you need to wrap your body. I'll show you the fundamental wraps here. There are more options, and you can certainly create more. Unfortunately, they're a bit beyond what I can show you. They're difficult to explain. So visually, I hope that you can get a good idea for them. As a general rule, some of them are easier when you can see the tip of the sash or the dart before you release it. If I'm throwing it over my shoulder out at the target here and it's coming from under my arm, if I can just barely see it, that will usually tell me my line is okay. If it's entirely blind, it's very difficult sometimes to be on target and accurate with it. Okay, when we start out with the first body wrap, this one starts from a rear shoot. After the sash is shot, we're simply going to guide it with the right hand over the right shoulder, across the back, and then catch it to the front of the body with the same hand. And this wrap can have two different types of releases. One is a vertical release, which I'm showing here, and the second one is a horizontal release, which you'll see in a more complex wrap, but similar foundation in the demo video. In this particular version, you'll notice that the body has to dip slightly, and this helps a lot for accuracy, to give a clean line to the target. And here's just a sample of how to slip the sash from one side to the other. This can be used after the release of the chute to pop the sash quickly back in the other direction by simply tugging up or lifting up in the middle of the sash. And this wrap is hidden well within a whole lot of other techniques within the demo here. You notice I first lead in with the rear chute around the body, go into the double sash technique, and then after the foot wrap, the sash is released. The next body wrap has its origins in one of the stops that we previously looked at for the short sash. Whereas previously we would wrap the sash around the back and catch it with the left hand in front of the body. In this case, we're using the exact same line, sending it across the back over the shoulder, but we're not catching it with the left hand. We're allowing it to continue, and we're catching it with the right hand. And the release or the chute for this particular wrap is done by sending the sash back in the same direction that it came, so over the left shoulder. And look at the body alignment. So there is a bit of a backward bend and lean to have a straight line for the sash. And in the demonstration, again, this technique is hidden with a lot of other movements as well. We initiate the wrap with a spinning turn or a horizontal stop that we covered from the sash techniques. So you can enter the same wrap in two different ways. One is to send the sash, like we just demoed, over behind the back and over the shoulder. And the other way to enter the exact same wrap is through this horizontal stop. Okay, then we continue, we do the butterfly twist, and the sash is released after that in the same manner just looked at. Okay, then we move into a double body wrap, or it's a combination body wrap and then elbow wrap. So once we have the first wrap that we previously looked at, we're going to send it around the back of the left elbow so that we've got a little bit more complex structure. And the release for this is very basic. You take one step and then you throw it horizontally around the body and it releases. It looks much more complicated than it is. Okay, and last for the long sash, we move into leg wraps and shoots. These are also pretty exciting techniques, and they come from the fundamental turning techniques that we covered during the sash element. The main difference is that we're not turning anymore, we're actually allowing it to wrap the leg entirely, and you catch it on the other side. From here, you can continue as if you were playing the sash. You could continue with all of the sash techniques you know, because presumably there's still enough slack left that you can still use it. Now the key is that if you wrap the leg one way, it has to go back the other way in order to release it. This is straightforward, common sense, and very easy to apply with this. So if you get caught up, if you're not sure, once you put it under the leg, just practice putting it back under the leg until it makes perfect sense. Okay, and I'll show you the inside and outside leg wraps. Again, not terribly complicated. If you're releasing them with your hand, this is not so bad. Accuracy is not so bad. But if you are releasing them, which is a higher category, with the foot instead of with the hand, so for example, if I have my leg wrapped and then I use my other leg or my foot to catch it and throw it instead of my hand, this requires a lot of practice. It's very difficult to do consistently, very difficult to be accurate with, and you'll need to put your time in. Years. It's not going to happen quick if you want to be good at this one. And next we'll look at a couple of double leg wrap options. I think these should definitely more be considered academic and for show, but they're a little fun to play with. I don't spend too much time on them, and I think that shows here. Um, but the basics are pretty simple, and we can have advanced versions where we even use the foot to release the chute. You wrap both legs, you turn 180 degrees, and the release happens behind the body. It can be accompanied by a stomp, a direct chute, or you can catch it with the right foot and swing it back behind you. And last, we will look at a double elbow chute. So with this technique, we start with a simple rear elbow chute. From there, we let it come across the back, but rather than bringing it to the front of the body, we swing it from the left elbow back to the right elbow, where we circle it 180 degrees on that elbow, and then it's through a twist of the hips and a full body turn that the chute is released. And within the middle, you use a kind of pendulum swing and momentum where as the sash is passing from the left to the right, you need to lift your left foot in order to avoid being hit. It also gives a little bit of space for the sash to pass back along. And you need to keep the elbows tight to the body until you're ready to rotate and release with the right arm.